Join me as we go step by step through Ina Garten's famed strawberry country cake recipe. Who's Ina Garten? Well, she's a treasure, not just for her legendary cookbooks stemming from her original New York boutique grocery store called Barefoot Contessa, but for her darling relationship with her husband Jeffrey, for whom she made a cookbook called Cooking for Jeffrey. When I crack open my Barefoot Contessa Parties cookbook, you can see that this page is well worn. Do the smears and splatters and smudges give it away? There's a reason why Jay Leno tried to eat this cake like a sandwich. Strawberry country cake is truly unique. I hope this isn't too crass, but it tastes like a Twinkie, but a gourmet, very well-considered Twinkie. One of the many fun things about this recipe is that you can fill it with whatever you have. Sure, I'll be using strawberries, but I also added blueberries. And if you didn't have those, you could use sliced banana or blackberries or peaches. It's up to you. Most of these ingredients you'll already have in your pantry. The battle is half won. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, oh, it's a vanilla cake. That sounds good. Well, that's just because you've never had the strawberry country cake before. This is a totally different experience in texture, in flavor, and in subtlety. Another great thing about this cake is that you can make it up to 1 month in advance of when you want to serve it, as long as you wrap it once it's cooled tightly in plastic wrap and stick it in your freezer. And I just thought of another excellent point. You can also make the filling and slice up your fruit, like I'm doing, well in advance of when you're serving it. This is the ace up your sleeve. This isn't served warm. This is the dynamic, robust, multifaceted dinner party hero. It's the Meryl Streep in your kitchen. I often find with recipes that it's the chopping that takes me the longest amount of time. So we're going to breeze through the express lane on that one. Once I have my berries sliced, they go back into a bowl, which will ultimately go into the fridge. But I put some whole berries on top, which are going to go on top of the cake. These are my show berries. So these are the berries that I want to be the most attractive. They're the starlets. Now I'm going to go ahead and whip the cream. I'm pouring in heavy whipping cream, which I'm just going to mix into oblivion. Can you imagine living in the time, not just before KitchenAids, but before handheld mixers, before electricity, sitting around with some antique whisk, beating this for goodness knows how long? It must have been exhausting, but also calorie burning. And they were about to have cream, so I guess it all evened out. Now here's a note of perfection for you. Is there such a thing as beating the cream too much? Is there such a thing as beating it too little? Yes, and yes. You want to whip the cream to the point where it's set up and it's thick and it will hold its shape if you take this whisk out and you hold the cream up in the air. If you beat it too hard, it can get too clumpy, almost like a butter. But not to worry, it's not a deal breaker because it's still whipped cream. You can't really lose. There are a number of ways to skin the horse of whipped cream. You can add vanilla extract, you can experiment with other extracts, different sweeteners. I've used agave, I've used powdered sugar. But regardless of the path that I choose to travel, one thing remains constant these days. I always add vanilla bean paste to my whipped cream because it adds this, those beautiful little black vanilla bean seeds, and it has that nice little nutty texture, but also it adds that floral flavor that comes from the vanilla. And ever since finding vanilla bean paste, I no longer have to slit open a vanilla bean and scrape it out. It's an extra step that I no longer have to do, as I'm just squeezing the paste out of a bottle. Of course, this will be lost on children, but to more discerning palates, there is a tremendous appreciation for the addition of real vanilla beans, just you see. Now, an a simpler way to make your springform pan, which is my preferred pan to cook this in, is to add a perfectly sized piece of parchment at the bottom that you can just peel off the cake when you flip it out, making the pan non-stick. So I put the pan down, I trace the outline, and then I cut it out with scissors. This cake is so good, you will not want a morsel, not even a schnecken, sticking to the sides of this pan. So this is a better option for making the pan truly non-stick than just spraying something like Pam on it, which loses some of its properties when it mixes with raw cake batter. So what you do is you take a cold stick of butter and you rub it around the sides of the springform pan, and then you sprinkle flour onto it. And once you have your flour sprinkled on to that smeared butter, you give it a little shake so that the entire surface of whatever butter has touched is now coated with flour, and you have a very strong protective shield against cake sticking. Now you take your perfectly cut piece of parchment and you stick it in the bottom of the pan, and then you set it aside for once the cake's done. Now this is a step that really makes a tremendous difference, even though it's a rather subtle touch. Lemon zest. So in the skin of citrus, oranges, limes, lemons, that's where the little tiny pores of oil live. The juicy citrus, the shock value citrus is on the inside, but that smooth, rich, incredibly strong and fragrant oil is on the outside. So with a zester, you are basically making tiny little scraped shavings of that oil-rich skin, and that is going to, as you can see, I'm using a tiny little handheld zester here. That is going to collect in the zester, and then you'll just flip that zester over and tap it out onto your plate. And even though this is well under a tablespoon of zest, it is so fragrant and powerful that it really is transformative. Oh my goodness, look at that color. The fragrance. Oh, if you could smell this right now. It's like you've slipped away into a lemon field in Tuscany. And I realize that zesting citrus is an additional step. It is a little bit of hassle. It does take a tremendous amount of willpower just to complete this step, but it's really so worth it. And this recipe is interesting because it calls not only for lemon zest, but for orange zest. Ah, unbelievable. Ina is so forward thinking. The difference between good and great lies in the details. So don't skip this step or you will be shortchanging yourself. Okay, now it's time to make the cake batter now that we've zested and set that aside. So in goes the sugar. Oh my goodness, what a noble ingredient. And then after that, we're adding softened butter. You want it to be softened so that this is going to mix together with the sugar and cream. So when you see in a recipe the term cream the butter and the sugar, well, that's exactly what we're doing. Ta-da! That is what creamed butter and sugar looks like. You just beat the daylights out of it until it looks creamy. Now in a bowl, I'm going to mix together the cornstarch, the kosher salt, and the baking soda. I'm putting it in a bowl so that I can easily pour it into the sifter. Now, why sift? Why go through all of this hassle? Well, because you have a very small amount of kosher salt and baking soda going into this, and unless that is mixed very, very well, chances are some part of the batter is going to have more than the other, and it's going to create a problem with uniformity. You want any slice of cake that you get to taste the same as any other from that cake. I'm talking about consistency. Nobody wants to be the person that gets a glob of salt in their cake. In America, we refrigerate eggs just try to leave them out for a bit so that they're room temperature before cracking. I hit mine onto a hard surface, not the edge of the bowl, driving the shell inward. And then, as you can see here, I'm pinching out the calazi, that white sort of giblety thing. It's tough. It's anatomically, yes, a part of the egg that I don't want anywhere near my baked goods. So I pinch into the bowl and I pull it out. Okay, now the egg is going into the creamed sugar and butter combination. And you want to add the eggs that hopefully are at room temperature. Hopefully you were able to control yourself and wait long enough to get those eggs at room temperature. Why? Because if the eggs are cold, if they hit the softened butter and they're cold, they are going to toughen the butter, and that part, it's not going to blend completely precisely. Is this going to be a disaster? No, but part of baking excellence is learning consistency. Again, how would you feel if you splurged on a cake and it tasted a little off compared to your neighbors? Well, that could be devastating. Not just for the evening, but for your social life. A note about KitchenAids. There are ingredients around the edge of the bowl that just don't get blended in. You've got some metal going around in the paddle, and it doesn't completely mix in the sides. So word to the wise, just use a little silicone spatula and push that down to the bowl. Keep mixing as though nothing has happened, because nothing has. Crisis has been averted once again. Now, after that's mixed, I am adding in the sour cream. I was just thinking, what would I have done if I didn't have sour cream? Because it's a common kitchen item, but I wouldn't say everybody at all times has sour cream in their fridge. I think a plain unsweetened yogurt could also be used. Try it out. Tell me what you think. So after mixing, I'm going to scrape down those sides to make sure that we are getting a uniform, consistent batter. Now, hold on to your hats. The zest is going in. Oh my goodness, just the scent of this zest is making my kitchen smell like a small, floorless, because we're renovating right now, so the floor is just exposed 1943 linoleum, a little floorless heaven. And then round and round it goes, mixing that beautiful zest into the batter, and this gives it this beautifully perfumed, it's a Twinkie-like flavor. And then vanilla extract goes in. Our heavy hitter, vanilla extract, saving the day as usual. My mother years ago gave me a bottle that instead of having vodka as the base, just a flavorless alcohol, which is the base of any extract, it's a brandy base, and it is so good. She used Tahitian and Mexican vanilla beans, and I still have it, and it just gets better with every passing day. There's something that reminds me of my grandmother's kitchen in a sifter. It's just such an old-fashioned looking instrument that hasn't changed much in the past 80 years. So what I do is I transfer the dry ingredients, that cornstarch, the salt, the baking soda, into the sifter, and then the little handle of the sifter gets cranked so that as I rotate the handle, that dry mixture is mixing into itself and then passing through the metal sieve that's at the bottom. And that ensures, going back to consistency, that you're not going to be that person getting a giant clump of kosher salt in your slice. Not at my dinner party. The texture of this is just amazing. It's so dense, and yet it has this chewiness to it. It's heaven. And just like that, the cake batter is done. I grab my treated springform pan that is truly a movement and anti-stick. And I'm going to take my silicone spatula, scraping lovingly down the sides of this gift that I hope to give my guests. And I scrape it into the springform pan. This is just, oh, it's too beautiful. And the scent of this is just delicious. So this is a very dense batter. This isn't pancake batter that's going to spread where it pleases. You definitely have to shape this and coax it, trying to get it as flat and as uniform. That's my catchphrase, I guess, for this episode. Uniformity. You want it to be uniform. You've gone through a lot of trouble at this point, so just use the follow through. Flatten it out. And then it's going into the oven at 350 degrees. Oh my goodness. There she goes. You just slide it right in there. Oh, the crowds are cheering. Oh, it's happening. And this will cook for about 40 minutes. But really what matters is checking your batter. Stick a fork into it. And if you pull it out and it's wet and goopy and the batter is sticking to your fork, guess what? It's not done. Back in it goes. Not to worry. You take it out, put a clean fork into it. Oh, look at that. The fork comes out clean. That means it's done. You take it out of the springform and you let it cool. And I actually made 2 cakes. So this is 1 cake layered on the other, cream and fruit in between. Oh my goodness. Now look at this texture. Oh, I hope you're not hungry. And the exteriors, you can see that's pretty brown because of the higher granulated sugar content in this, is chewy and thick. And then a touch of gold powder takes it OTT, over the top. Oh my goodness. This was a triumph.